had been lost forever, including the first episode of the popular police drama Z-Cars. This report from our media correspondent Nick Hyam.
When the first episode of Z-Cars went out in 1962, its realism came as a shock. It was as controversial as the idea of putting policemen into patrol cars with radios seemed to old-style coppers.
I'll tell you this, John. I won't have any of my lads sitting in plush seats out of the rain, playing at Raymond Glendenning on the wireless set, ab-dabbing with some female broadcaster from county headquarters, and driving by with music on the light programme. Oh,
These old programmes have considerable historical interest, but all copies of this episode of Z-Cars were thought to have vanished until one turned up in Cyprus.
Well done, you know.
It takes careful detective work by enthusiasts like Steve Bryant to track down lost programmes.
It's an episode of At Last, the 1948 show, made in 1967 by Associated Rediffusion. We found it in Sweden, where I assume it's been since the late 60s, when it would have been sold for transmission by Rediffusion.
The 30-somethings at last night's showing of old children's programmes had gone to be entertained, not educated.
Well, it's just of my era. I'm bringing my daughter along, and it's all the programmes that I remember. And I've got an old school chum to come along with me, and we're going to go along and reminisce.
It's curious to see how bad some of the television programmes were in the old days and how far we've come.
But some have a more personal interest, like the man who directed 50 episodes of a children's serial called Gary Halliday.
How do you think they'll stand up for an audience watching them today?
I dread to think, because the camera work must be now, I should think, very old-fashioned. But we'll bite our nails and see.
Thanks for doing that groundwork there and handing over to me.
It's not only the camera work that's old-fashioned.
Here goes show number 3, all together now. Time to kangaroo down, spot. Riveted cover down.
This Rolf Harris show was last seen in 1967.
When we actually sat down and watched the programme, we were very struck by how much a flavour of the period it gave. It's slightly amateurish, perhaps, by modern standards, but that, in fact, was a lot of its charm.
The technical quality of the recordings isn't always perfect. The BBC lost this episode of Steptoe and Son, but one of the writers, Ray Galton, turned out to have a copy made on an antique home video machine. And once more, viewers can see Harold Steptoe's political pretensions being punctured.
Yes, there'll be plenty for them to do here. Table tennis, rat hunting. I can see you all now going for long tramps across the yard, deep in intellectual conversation and horse manure.
All in glorious monochrome. Jill Dando says she can't remember it. I fear she may be right. I